Imagine standing on a frozen island the size of Western Europe. Beneath your feet lie trillions of dollars in oil, rare earth minerals and natural gas. Above you, the shortest flight path between Russian missiles and American cities. Around you, melting ice revealing shipping routes that could change global trade forever. This isn't a science fiction novel. This is Greenland. And right now, in January 2025, the world's superpowers are in a silent war to control it. When Donald Trump said he wanted to buy Greenland in 2019, the world laughed. Late-night hosts mocked him. Denmark called it absurd. But here's what nobody told you. Trump wasn't the first American president to try. He was the third. And in 2025, he's back with a new plan. This time, he's not just asking politely. This time, the military option is on the table. Before we reveal why, Greenland has become the most dangerous piece of real estate on Earth. Hit that subscribe button and join the Wealth Forum. We break down the geopolitical and economic forces, reshaping your world. Today, we're exposing the new Cold War, and it's being fought over ice. To understand why superpowers are fighting over a frozen rock, you need to understand what Greenland actually is. It's the world's largest island that isn't a continent, 80% covered in ice, population of just 56,000 people, smaller than a packed football stadium. For centuries, it was ignored, a Danish colony, a strategic afterthought. But three things changed everything. First, the ice is melting. Climate change is opening up Arctic shipping routes that have been frozen for millennia. The Northern Sea route along Russia's coast can cut 15 days off shipping time from Asia to Europe. That's billions in fuel savings. That's reshaping global trade. Second, what's under the ice? Greenland sits on massive deposits of rare earth minerals, the same materials that power your smartphone, electric cars, and military weapons systems. China currently controls 80 to 90% of rare earth processing globally. Greenland could break that monopoly. One site alone, Kvanefjeld, contains over 1 million metric tons of rare earth oxides. That's a strategic game changer. Third, geography. Look at a globe, not a flat map. Greenland sits directly between North America, Europe, and Russia. It's the cork in the bottle, the choke point, the unsinkable aircraft carrier. During the Cold War, the US built Thule Air Base in northwest Greenland. Today it's called Pacific Space Base. It's home to the northernmost early warning radar system on Earth. It watches for ballistic missiles launched over the Arctic. Without it, America goes partially blind. A missile from northern Russia to Washington, D.C. travels about 2,000 miles. From Greenland to Moscow, even shorter. Geography compresses reaction time. In nuclear war, minutes mean everything. And here's the kicker. Greenland isn't even fully independent. It's a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark provides about $600 million annually in subsidies. That covers over half of Greenland's public budget. Without it, the economy collapses. But Greenlanders want independence. Polls show 60 to 80% support it. The problem? They can't afford it, unless someone else steps in with money. And that's where the superpowers smell blood in the water. Let's break down exactly how Greenland became the center of a new Cold War. Think of it as a three-player chess game. America, China, and Russia. Each has different goals, different strategies, different timelines. America's play is defensive and traditional. The US has had military presence since World War II. Thule Air Base was critical during the Cold War to detect Soviet bombers. Today, Pacific Space Base tracks missiles and space debris. The US spent decades assuming this access was guaranteed. Denmark is a NATO ally. Greenland wasn't going anywhere, but then came the wake-up call. In 2016, China tried to buy an abandoned naval base in Greenland. Denmark blocked it under US pressure. In 2018, a Chinese company attempted to build 3 airports in Greenland. Again, the US intervened. Washington realized Denmark couldn't afford to develop Greenland's infrastructure, and China was ready to write checks. So America pivoted. In 2020, the US reopened a consulate in Nuuk, Greenland's capital. For the first time since the 1950s, it came with $12 million in development aid. The message was clear. We're back. We're investing. We're not letting China in. But $12 million is pocket change compared to what China can offer. China's play is economic and patient. Beijing doesn't need to buy Greenland. It just needs to become indispensable. The strategy is simple. Offer infrastructure financing that Denmark can't match. Build ports, airports, telecommunications networks. Make Greenland dependent on Chinese money. Then, when Greenland eventually declares independence from Denmark, they're already in China's economic orbit. This is the Belt and Road playbook. We've seen it in Sri Lanka, where a port lease became de facto Chinese control. We've seen it in Djibouti, where China built its first overseas military base. The formula works. Loan money for infrastructure. When the country can't repay, convert debt into strategic access. For Greenland, this is terrifying and tempting. Terrifying because it means trading. Danish colonial influence for Chinese. Economic colonialism. Tempting because China doesn't lecture about human rights or democracy. They just build stuff. Russia's play is spoiler and opportunist. Moscow doesn't have the money to compete with China or the alliance structure of the US, but Russia has proximity and presence. The Russian Northern Fleet operates from bases near Murmansk, just across the Arctic from Greenland. Russia claims massive portions of the Arctic seabed under international law. They've planted flags on the ocean floor. They've built military bases on Arctic islands. For Russia, Greenland is part of a larger Arctic strategy. Control shipping routes, control resources, deny the West total dominance. If the US tries to lock down Greenland militarily, Russia can make noise, create incidents, force costly responses. If China gains economic leverage, Russia can partner as the junior ally providing security. Moscow plays the chaos agent, stirring the pot, making sure no one gets too comfortable. And here's where it gets complex. All three players are constrained by one actor nobody is talking about: the Greenlandic people themselves. Greenlanders are not stupid. They've been colonized by Denmark for centuries. They see what happened to indigenous populations in North America. They're wary of American promises. They see what China did in Africa. They're wary of debt traps. They remember Russian imperialism. They want none of it. What Greenlanders actually want is simple: independence with dignity, economic development without exploitation, respect for their culture and environment. The problem is, the math doesn't work. Without external funding, independence means poverty. And that brings us to January 2025, the moment everything accelerated. Donald Trump, back in office, made Greenland a top priority. Not quietly, not diplomatically, publicly and aggressively. In early January, the White House confirmed Trump and his national security team are exploring all options for securing Greenland. When asked about military force, Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said, "Utilizing the US military is always an option." That statement detonated across Europe. Denmark, a NATO ally, reaffirmed Greenland is not for sale. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen warned that any use of force would undermine the post-World War II international order. France, Germany, and Canada publicly backed Denmark. The headlines screamed about American imperialism, but here's what most coverage missed. This isn't about Trump being crazy. This is about America finally waking up to a strategic nightmare decades in the making. Let me walk you through the nightmare scenario, keeping Pentagon planners awake. It's 2030. Greenland declares independence from Denmark. The Danish subsidy ends. Greenland's government desperately needs money. China steps in, not with loans, with a partnership. China offers to build a deep-water port in southern Greenland, officially for commercial shipping, dual-use capability for military vessels. They offer to build a telecommunications network, 5G infrastructure, dual use for surveillance. They offer to develop Kvanefjeld rare earth mine, joint venture, Chinese processing facilities. In exchange, Greenland gets billions in investment, jobs, development, independence funding. The Greenlandic government, seeing no better option, says yes. Now, Chinese cargo ships regularly dock in Greenland. Chinese engineers operate critical infrastructure. Chinese satellites have ground stations on Greenland soil. The US early warning radar at Patuxent becomes vulnerable. If China builds signals intelligence facilities nearby, they can monitor and potentially jam American missile defense systems. The shortest route for Russian missiles to America now has Chinese eyes and ears along the path. The Guyuk Gap, the critical naval choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK, is compromised. Chinese dual-use ports mean potential submarine resupply, potential anti-ship missile batteries, potential surveillance of NATO naval movements. Suddenly the US has lost its Arctic shield. The cork is out of the bottle, and there's no military solution. You can't invade Greenland without triggering World War III. You can't sanction Greenland without looking like a colonial bully. You can't outbid China because Congress won't allocate hundreds of billions for a frozen island. This is the nightmare, and it's not hypothetical. It's the logical endpoint of current trends. Trump's advisors see this timeline. They see 5 years, maybe 10, before it's too late. So the aggressive rhetoric isn't madness. It's panic. The military option on the table isn't a real plan to invade. It's a negotiating tactic, a signal to Denmark, a warning to China, a message to Greenland. The subtext is clear. America will do whatever it takes to prevent Chinese control, even if that means making Denmark very uncomfortable, even if that means massive investment we can't afford, even if that means threatening a NATO ally. But here's the problem with threatening your friends. It pushes them away. Denmark is furious. Greenlandic leaders are offended. European allies are questioning American reliability. And China is watching all of this with popcorn. Every misstep by America makes China's soft power approach look better by comparison. Beijing doesn't threaten. Beijing builds. The crisis isn't just about Greenland. It's about America's declining ability to maintain its empire without coercion. For 70 years, the US led through a combination of economic incentives, security guarantees, and ideological appeal. Now, the economy is financialized and debt-ridden. Security guarantees come with aggressive demands. Ideological appeal is tarnished by decades of Middle East wars and domestic political chaos. China offers a simpler deal: money, infrastructure, no lectures. In a post-American world, that's often enough. So what actually happens next? Let's wargame the scenarios because Greenland's future will reshape global power. Scenario 1, America locks it down. Through some combination of massive investment, diplomatic pressure, and backroom deals, the US convinces Denmark to allow expanded military presence. Maybe even a framework where Greenland gets more autonomy but remains under NATO protection. The US pours billions into Greenland development. Airports, ports, renewable energy. In exchange, China is kept out. Rare earth mines are developed by Western companies. The Arctic remains under Western control. This is the best case for Washington. But it requires money America doesn't have, and political will that's uncertain. Scenario 2, China wins economically. Greenland eventually goes independent. China becomes the primary investor and partner. Not through force, through checkbook diplomacy. The US maintains Pacific space base, through negotiated agreement, but loses broader strategic influence. Chinese shipping, telecommunications, and resource extraction become dominant. The Arctic becomes contested space. This scenario doesn't mean war. It means a fundamental shift in the balance of power. The US loses its northern shield. NATO's Atlantic dominance is challenged. Global shipping routes shift toward Chinese infrastructure. Scenario 3, Greenland plays everyone. This is the smartest move for Greenland itself. Maintain strategic ambiguity. Take investment from everyone. Let the US keep its radar base. Let China build some infrastructure. Sell rare earths to the highest bidder. Stay neutral. Become the Arctic Switzerland. This maximizes Greenland's leverage and development. But it requires sophisticated political leadership and the ability to resist pressure from all sides. It's the hardest path, but potentially the most rewarding. Scenario 4, climate catastrophe accelerates. The ice melts faster than predicted. Greenland's interior becomes partially habitable. Population explodes as climate refugees and economic migrants arrive. The island becomes a chaotic frontier. Multiple powers establish competing zones of influence. This is the Mad Max scenario. Low probability but not zero. If global temperatures rise beyond worst-case predictions, Greenland transforms from frozen wasteland to contested territory, literally overnight in geological terms. No matter which scenario plays out, the consequences ripple globally. For global trade, whoever controls Greenland influences Arctic shipping. That determines whether goods flow on Chinese infrastructure or Western infrastructure. For military strategy, Greenland determines who sees threats coming. Early warning, surveillance, missile defense, control equals safety. For rare earth supply chains, Greenland could break Chinese monopoly or reinforce it depending on who develops the mines. For climate geopolitics, Greenland is the canary in the coal mine. As ice melts, conflicts over newly accessible resources intensify. What happens in Greenland previews what happens across the entire Arctic. For the average person, this feels distant. An island of 56,000 people. Who cares? But here's why you should care. The rare earths in Greenland power your phone. The shipping routes determine the cost of everything you buy. The military bases determine whether nuclear war has a 10-minute warning or a 2-minute warning. Greenland isn't just a frozen rock. It's a pressure point in the global system. And when pressure points fail, systems break. So what's the lesson here? What does Greenland teach us about the world we're entering? First, geography still matters. In an age of cyber warfare and drones, we forget that physical location determines power. Greenland matters because of where it is. You can't hack geography. You can't sanction latitude and longitude. Whoever controls key terrain controls options. Second, climate change is a geopolitical weapon. The melting ice isn't just an environmental crisis. It's unlocking resources and routes that rewrite the strategic map. The side effects of industrial civilization are now reshaping great power competition. Third, money talks louder than values. America wants to lead through democracy and human rights. China leads through infrastructure and investment. Right now, in places like Greenland, the checkbook beats the speech. Nations choose development over lectures. This isn't cynicism. It's realism. Fourth, empires don't fall in one dramatic moment. They erode at the edges. Greenland is an edge, a periphery. If America loses Greenland, it doesn't mean immediate collapse. It means one more piece of the global chessboard changes color. Death by 1,000 cuts. Finally, small populations can have disproportionate power. 56,000 Greenlanders hold the keys to Arctic dominance. Their choice matters more than the opinions of 330 million Americans, or 1.4 billion Chinese. In a multipolar world, the small and weak can play giants against each other. This is both opportunity and danger. Greenland's story isn't finished. It's accelerating. The decisions made in Nuuk, Copenhagen, Washington, and Beijing over the next 5 years will echo for generations. Will Greenland become a new frontier of cooperation or a flashpoint for conflict? Will it lift its people out of poverty or become a resource colony once again? Will it remain a quiet backwater or become a battlefield? We don't know yet, but we do know this. The age of ignoring Greenland is over. The scramble for the Arctic has begun, and the island everyone dismissed as a frozen wasteland is now the prize everyone wants. The new Cold War isn't being fought in Berlin or the South China Sea. It's being fought in the ice. If this breakdown of Greenland's strategic importance opened your eyes to what's really at stake, smash that like button and subscribe to the Wealth Forum. Turn on notifications because we're tracking this story as it unfolds in real time. The Arctic is heating up, and so is the competition. Here's my question for you. If you were Greenland, who would you choose? American security guarantees with strings attached, Chinese infrastructure money with hidden costs, or try to play both sides and stay independent? Drop your strategy in the comments. Let's debate who wins the new Cold War. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay skeptical. And remember, the future isn't written in Washington or Beijing. Sometimes it's written in ice,